Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1039 for January 14th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
It'll be a process where he's not going to just, finish up on a Friday and we'll never see him again. It's more of a handing over of the role over a period of time.
Dave McCabe is taking over the role of Master Blender at Irish Distillers, and he has a big pair of shoes to fill. Billy Leighton is easing into retirement after 47 years with the company and almost 7 years with Dave as his apprentice. I'll talk with Dave McCabe about the pressures of replacing an industry legend later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and a lot more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Greetings, everyone. It's Gabriel Cardarello with Jewers, and I have big news. Jewers is about to unveil the first chapter of a 4-part collector series dedicated to honoring the most famous whiskey-producing regions of Scotland. More on that in a bit.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast, Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. The economic downturn is being felt especially hard this week on Islay, where Hunter Lang & Company's Ardnahoe Distillery announced plans this week to close its cafe facility. The move is expected to affect 14 jobs at the distillery, according to the Islay newspaper. The distillery said in an Instagram post that public tours and the gift shop will not be affected by the closing. For the first time in more than a decade, Irish whiskey exports are down year over year, largely to a decline in U.S. sales. That's according to a new report from Board Bia, the Irish government's food and drinks promotion agency. Exports to the U.S. were off by 14% in 2023 compared to 2022. The U.S. accounts for almost half of all Irish whiskey exports, and the decline is being blamed on heavy stocking in 2022 following pandemic-related supply chain issues. Globally, Irish whiskey exports were off by 8%, but did show strong gains in Europe, the UK, Asia, and Africa. In other news, Kentucky is getting another distillery. RD1 Spirits broke ground this week on a micro-distillery and visitors center that will anchor the new Commons Entertainment District in Lexington. The $5 million project will focus heavily on tourism. The distillery itself will produce 1 barrel a week for research and development purposes. RD1's bourbons will continue to be distilled at Western Kentucky Distilling Company. The project is expected to open to the public in August. Ohio's Middle West Spirits has completed an expansion project that will increase the distillery's production capacity tenfold. The 75,000-square-foot expansion includes new grain processing and bottling facilities. It's expected to increase the company's contract distilling profile while allowing for expansion of its own brands. Talisker Distillery on the Isle of Skye is getting a new pop-up restaurant this spring. The 3 Chimneys at Talisker will be a focal point of the distillery's newly renovated visitors center. It comes from the team behind the award-winning 3 Chimneys restaurant on the island. Gordon & MacPhail is getting a new CEO. Philip White will take over in April from retiring CEO Ewan McIntosh. White is a former Brown-Forman and Bacardi executive who's been working in the wholesale food business since 2020. He's expected to focus on growing Gordon & MacPhail's international business. There's a change in leadership at Iowa's award-winning Cedar Ridge Distillery. Murphy Quint is taking over for his father Jeff as master distiller. Jeff Quint founded the distillery in 2005. In addition, Jamie Siefkin has been promoted to the role of president and general manager, responsible for the distillery's day-to-day business operations. Cedar Ridge produces the quintessential American single malt, along with other whiskeys and spirits. New whiskeys unveiled this week. Old Forester is expanding its Whiskey Row series with a new 10-year-old bourbon that commemorates 100 years of a unique bourbon first released in 1924 during Prohibition. Old Forester was one of 6 distilleries back then allowed to bottle whiskey during Prohibition for medicinal use, and in 1924 acquired barrels from closed distilleries and blended them together to create a new Old Forester blend. Old Forester 1924 will be available nationwide in the U.S. with a recommended retail price of $115 a bottle. I received a sample this week. I'll have my tasting notes for it in a few minutes. Garrison Brothers Distillery in Texas is about to release its latest batch of Guadalupe port cask finished bourbon. It's matured for 4 years in American oak, followed by 2 years in tawny port casks sourced from Portugal. The 2024 batch will have a recommended retail price of $149.99 when it goes on sale at the distillery February 3rd. It'll be available in limited amounts nationwide by the end of next month. Sagamore Spirit has a new distillery-exclusive bottling. It's a second batch of Woodstove Imperial Stout cask-aged rye, produced in collaboration with Baltimore's Monument City Brewing Company. The brewery aged its Imperial Stout in Sagamore Spirit casks, then sent the casks back to finish 4-year-old straight rye whiskey for an extra 13 months. It's available at the distillery in Baltimore for $79.99 a bottle. And finally, your tax dollars at work, if you're in the U.S. The Distilled Spirits Council has been granted $1.1 million by the Agriculture Department to promote American spirits overseas this year. Discus was one of nearly 70 organizations to receive market access program funding from the Ag Department this year. It'll use that funding to support trade missions and marketing campaigns for American-made spirits in key export markets. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening this week in the whiskey world. It's a busy week. The Edmonton MS Whiskey Festival is this Wednesday night in Edmonton, Alberta, followed on Thursday night by the Calgary MS Whiskey Festival and the start of the Victoria Whiskey Festival with the Canadian Whiskey Awards dinner. The Southport Winter Whiskey Festival is this Friday and Saturday in Southport, England, along with Bourbon Con in Lexington, Kentucky. The Nth Bermuda takes place January 25th through the 29th. The Whiskey Global is in Vancouver, British Columbia on the 26th, along with the Scottish National Whiskey Festival in Glasgow. The Chicago and Denver Winter Whiskey Festivals are both on the 27th. Bourbon's Bistro in Louisville, Kentucky hosts a Castle and Key bourbon dinner on the 31st. And the Whiskey Exchange in London has a wild turkey tasting with Bruce Russell on the 31st as well. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and the WhiskyCast community app.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie, a climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Dave McCabe has been a WhiskyCast fixture for years. In fact, it's his voice you hear on our Redbreast commercials each week. Not Robin Redbreast, but the other guy. A few weeks ago, Dave ended his apprenticeship with longtime Midleton master blender Billy Leighton when Billy decided to move into an emeritus role and turn day-to-day blending operations over to Dave. It's the culmination of a plan that started back in 2017 when Dave began his apprenticeship, and I got the chance to catch up with him on a Zoom call the other day. So how does it feel to finally be master blender for Midleton Distillery?
It's an absolute dream come true, Mark. Something I never imagined could happen, but here I am now and still pinching myself.
When did Billy let you know that he was going to step aside?
I suppose we never really talked about it ever formally since I began working with Billy since 2017. But over the last few months, I guess there was talk that he's coming up to thinking about retirement, and would I be okay with stepping up to the plate and following in his footsteps, but knowing that it'd be a process where he's not going to just finish up on a Friday and we'll never see him again. It's more of a handing over of the role over a period of time. That while I'm now say in the driving seat, Billy's still very much around and will be for a while, but just to slow down his pace to get to a level where he's able to comfortably kind of finish up after 47 years of being in the industry himself.
After 47 years, he's earned the right to go out the way he wants to.
Absolutely.
What have you guys been working on?
I guess over the last 12 months, we have a bit of a vision with pipeline for the various brands. And, when it comes to Redbreast, the Iberian series is something we're always working on, and Dream Cask, as you know. So Dream Cask is something that we've kind of got to a point where we're going to be close to bottling soon for release later in the year. So that's an exciting time for us as well. And just with Kevin O'Gorman this week, we've been working on the next Midleton Very Rare for the coming few months as well, 2024. So a few brands that you'd be familiar with, but still require all the work, nevertheless, on them.
How much input do you get into Midleton Very Rare? I know Kevin puts his name on that one.
He does. There'd be a huge amount of collaboration, I suppose, between Kevin as master distiller and myself and Billy and some of the blending team like Brona Kelly, who you mightn't have met yet, and Deirdre Carroll. But it kind of it's a relationship where we would look at the volumes that we are going to look at for making Midleton and the stock that's available. Kevin then would review the previous iterations of Midleton that he's kind of worked on in terms of a formula, and would say, I liked the input of grain volume that I did last year. I wouldn't mind sticking to that or going slightly higher or lower. So between him having those types of decisions and the stock that we know is available and not being needed for anything else currently, we'd let Kevin know, that stock that you're interested in, that's free. The stock that you're looking at here, there's other stock that's coming of age you might be interested in. And here are the barrel splits of first fill barrels and refill. So from there, myself and the blending team, we would pull samples from all those barrels, make prototypes, and then Kevin would look at those various prototypes and pick which one he likes the most for what he's looking for in that particular vintage. And then he would start screening, along with ourselves, all the barrels, every single one that goes into making that year's vintage.
Give me a sense of the process that goes into blending a whiskey from the beginning.
From the beginning, where to start, Mark? If it's an existing product, I could give an example of Redbreast 12, which we all are very au fait with. It works at first stock management, because if I know what the sales forecasts are for 2024 for the year for Redbreast, I know what type of volume that's going to require from all the barrels that are used in the making of Redbreast. So I would spend a lot of time on Excel, really managing what stock is there and calculating how many litres of alcohol that's going to equate to throughout the next 12 months to make Redbreast 12. And then from there, make sure I have enough 11-year-old stock for next year. I have enough 10-year-old stock in 2 years' time. So I'll actually forecast out to the likes of, bizarre years like 2060, for example. So you're always making sure you have enough stock ahead of time for when you need it in the right proportion of barrels and at the right age. And then on a day-to-day basis, we'll get a bottling schedule, and we'll be told, okay, next week we need to make so many litres of Redbreast 12. That then entails calculating how many barrels are needed at that point in time to make that volume of Redbreast. So from the formula, I know how much of our pot still spirit in bourbon barrels at a certain age is needed, how much pot still spirit in sherry barrels is needed at the right age and in the right mix. So I'll calculate how many barrels that will equate to. I then send a request to the team in the warehousing. I'll get samples from all those barrels back. I'll nose them, make sure they're all okay from a quality point of view. I'll make up a miniature blend of that offering compared to the last few batches that I would have made to make sure it's all on par from a consistency point of view. Sign off on that, and then those barrels get picked. They all get emptied, married together. There's a bit of a time in the vat for them to get on, and we kind of aerate the vat just to mix everything together. A sample comes back then to check that that's all okay from the miniatures I looked at, and then it goes from there to the bottling hall. And once it's bottled, it comes back again for one final review, signed off by no less than 3 people on our sensory panel team, and then it goes out to the various markets around the world. And that's just for one brand.
It's a lot more than just being a good nose, right?
Yeah, having I suppose a trained nose is essential for the work that I would do, but it's all about making sure you don't run out of stock for the year for any of the brands, and that you make sure you're leaving enough stock behind for the next generation who are going to be blending when I'm gone.
You're part of the new generation that's coming up that we learned about a few years ago with the Masters and Apprentices program, where it was Billy, Kevin O'Gorman is Master of Wood, Brian Nation is Master Distiller back then, that were raising up a team of apprentices to take over. And you're sort of the first to take over in that new role. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot, because it just shows that I'm working for a distillery that really puts value into the team that works there, and gives a sense of kind of an idea of where they want us to go, and provide as much resources and help that we'll need to achieve our future ambitions. So, working for Billy as kind of his apprentice for all those years, anything that I needed in terms of help to get to a level that Billy would be comfortable with me taking over, I think that's a great testament to the distillery, to Midleton Distillery that I work for, that they manage the future with expansions and distillery, buildings and progressing with volumes for the future, but they also look at the people who are needed to do that. So by looking at the younger generation, making sure that they are getting the resources and experience by working alongside the likes of Billy, Brian, Kevin, that one day when we do have to take over from them, that we're in a comfortable position to do that seamlessly. And that's kind of what I would really say about this distillery.
How did you develop your nose from those early days working at the Irish Whiskey Academy on the Midleton campus to becoming master blender today? How did you develop your nose?
It took time, because the length and breadth of the portfolio we have and the various casks that we have, it's something that you learn and you develop over a long period of time. And I guess you mentioned the Irish Whiskey Academy. We started building that in 2012 and opened it in 2013. And I guess from there were certain classes in the academy that involved doing blending exercises, plus the various tastings of all the brands that we make. So I guess from doing the tastings and talking to people about the brands and what makes them different from a sensory point of view, I was getting very intimate with what makes Green Spot different to Powers John's Lane from a flavour point of view, and what makes that different to Midleton Very Rare, because you're doing it on a daily basis. And with the blending classes, we were looking at high strength individual cask samples, reduce them with water, blend them in different proportions. And when Billy would be available, he would actually come down and go through the blending class as well, as a kind of a guest lecturer, so to speak, or a guest speaker. So I would have worked alongside him from that early days, understanding how blending works, the permutations are involved, the flavors you look for with individual cask types. And Billy was good enough back then, even before I started working with him, like 2014, 2015, he would have brought me to Spain to the cask suppliers and the Paez family to understand more about sherry and the flavors that are in our whiskey due to the sherry seasoning process. I was lucky to get to the States and go to some of our cooperages over there, understanding that. And that was again before being apprenticed to Billy. So I guess all those elements in my job in the academy, and then the bits where Billy was bringing me places to understand more, helped develop my nose and understanding to get to this point. And then by being apprenticed to Billy all the years up to now, the thousands upon thousands of samples we would have nosed together and discussing flavors and, pointing out that this cask is a little bit different to that one for these reasons, and finding that we're on the same page for a lot of it. I guess you're talking a lot of time to get to where I am now.
What's the best lesson Billy taught you?
Patience, I think, would be one thing, and just being very, very meticulous when it comes to detail. And that's something I learned from him without him ever having to tell me it, because Billy pays so much attention to detail in everything he does, and he has the patience to do it. That's the main lesson I learned, because, as I said, he's been doing it for 47 years, being in the industry. He's seen it all, when you think about it. So the highs and lows in the whiskey industry, the successes, the downtimes, he's been through it all. So he never gets panicked, you could say, about meeting deadlines that you might miss something if you're rushing it. So I learned a lot from him in that respect.
Do you see yourself staying in the job for 47 years the way Billy did?
If Midleton Distillery keeps me for that long, I'm sure I'd be very comfortable and happy in doing what I do. I feel where I am now and the role I have, as I said, it's a bit of a dream come true, but there's still a lot to be done personally to keep on improving in what I'm doing. I guess my aspiration at the minute is just to keep the boat steady, when there's a new driver taking over, because for me, it's not about being a maverick and wanting to make any major changes. I just want to make sure that I can keep the brands that we have as consistent and as high quality as they are, and out into the future, while developing maybe new and interesting brands along the way when required, but not making any major changes, because it's not about that. It's more about being given the torch to carry now, make sure that you're leaving the place as well or in better position for the next group after me.
Have you started the process of identifying your eventual replacement yet, or your first apprentice?
It's early days at the minute. I think I just need to get settled into managing myself first, and taking over a lot of what Billy does in terms of inventory planning. I do a lot of that at the minute, plus brand, you could say daily blending operations. But the more and more Billy is kind of winding down, the more I'll be taking over on the inventory and the planning side as well. So as that comes along, I have two blenders working with me at the minute, Brona Kelly and Deirdre Carroll. Deirdre's on maternity leave, as you know, probably from chatting to you before, Mark. So we have a nice little team going at the minute. So long may that last for now.
Thanks to Dave McCabe for spending some time with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's start off with a couple of the Method and Madness whiskeys Dave McCabe worked on during his apprenticeship. The first one is an Irish single malt matured in a combination of sherry and American oak barrels, then finished in French chestnut casks. It's bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has dry spices, a touch of chestnut wood, baked apples, and cinnamon bark. The taste is dominated by cinnamon spiciness with baked apples and honey underneath, while the finish is long and spicy. I'm scoring it a 92. Our second Method in Madness whiskey is also an Irish single malt, but this one was matured in ex-bourbon barrels, then finished in French Limousin oak casks. It's also bottled at 46% ABV. The nose is sweet with butterscotch, a hint of honey, dried flowers, and oak tannins. The taste has an excellent balance of butterscotch and white pepper with touches of allspice and honey. The finish, long with a gently lingering spice. I'm scoring the Method in Madness Limousin Oak Finish Single Malt a 92. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 200-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature Double Oak, Cask Strength, or Reserve Series ryes at a retailer near you. Visit SagamoreSpirit.com and please drink responsibly. Next up, the Old Forester 1924 bourbon that I mentioned during the news. This one is bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose has touches of fudge, chocolate, leather, tobacco, and wood spices. The taste has an excellent balance of chocolate, cinnamon, graham crackers, caramel, cocoa beans, and a hint of honey. The finish has lingering spices and a touch of chocolate, and I'm scoring the Old Forester 1924 bourbon a 93. And let's wrap up with a craft whiskey, a single-barrel rye from Liberty Pole Spirits in Washington, Pennsylvania. This 3-year-old rye has warm baking spices on the nose, along with a hint of dill, molasses cookies, and honey. The taste is thick, chewy, and spicy with cloves, cinnamon, and allspice notes, with hints of molasses and honey underneath. The finish is long and spicy with a hint of molasses, and I'm scoring the Liberty Pole Spirits single-barrel rye a 92. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,600 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
At Dewar's, we are gearing up to unveil a prestigious 4-part collector series of exceptionally high-end blended malts. The first gem in this collection, none other than the extraordinary Dewar's Double 37-year-old, a blended malt that is nothing short of remarkable. The Double 37-year-old undergoes Dewar's cutting-edge 4-stage aging process, meticulously designed to draw out the essence of whiskey barrels dating back to the late 80s. The result? An impeccable balance and a level of smoothness that is off the charts. To pay homage to the Speyside whiskey producing region, it gets an extra tip of the hat, with the finishing process resting in Oloroso sherry casks that once cradled the prestigious Altmore single malt whiskey. As for the taste adventure, brace yourself for captivating notes that include the warmth of cinnamon, the velvety sweetness of heather honey, succulent juiciness of peaches, zesty pops of orange peel, and a decadent shower of brown sugar. And let me be clear, I'm merely giving you a glimpse of the sensational flavor adventure this whiskey has in store. This exceptional whiskey, though, is a rare find, so stay vigilant and find it at a store near you.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. Had lots of comments about Hunter Lang's decision to close the cafe at Ardnahoe Distillery on Islay. Rick at the Whiskey Zone posted this in the app. It's sad to hear this. I had the good fortune to visit there in 2021, and sitting in that cafe, eating very tasty food and looking out over the paths of Jura is one of those special quiet moments of an Islay visit. I guess this is what can happen when you're family-owned instead of corporate-funded, sending good thoughts to those being displaced. Tom the Tracer Bullet replied with this, At HRC and I were there in 2018. Unfortunately, Ardnahoe was not yet open for visitors, so that is an experience I thought I would get on my next Islay visit. Disappointed that it won't happen. I'm hoping that this is isolated. I'd hate to see a pullback from the other Islay distilleries. And our good friend Ian Buxton posted this in the app. Tough location for a cafe. Not exactly lots of passing traffic and locals thin on the ground. If you have a comment on the week's news or anything else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast Community app from the iOS or Android app stores and join the conversation. You can also find us on Threads, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
That's the sound of our whiskey growing on Dunbell Farm, County Kilkenny. We know where every grain comes from. Only Irish barley, one farm, one terroir at a time. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Today we think of whiskey as coming from cereal grains, but that wasn't always the case. In the new book, The Distillation of Whiskey, Notes and Observations on its Historical and Practical Aspects, 1927 to 1931, there's a section on whiskey made from bananas, or rather, a whiskey-like alcohol that was made in Guatemala in 1913 and 1914. Green bananas were mashed and the sterilized results mixed with rye or barley malt for saccharification before distilling. Prohibition in Guatemala stopped the whole thing before it could get off the ground, but bananas can still be used to make alcohol, including a banana-based wine that can be distilled. And no dad jokes about the appeal of such a product, or how drinking too much of it might make one go bananas. Got to keep the scientific integrity of this segment intact. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this week's episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast Community app. Download it today from the iOS or Android app stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
The average college basketball power forward is 6'9", which, according to my rough calculations, is 16.5 times my height. I'll stick to aimlessly pottering around in back gardens.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast, Redbreast. Pass it on.
Dewar's Double 37-year-old blended malt whiskey is a true collector's treasure, a rarity worth hunting for and cherishing, perhaps sharing with the lucky few. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2023 Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 48% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.